Um, in terms of your with asset management coming in, I suppose, what did it mean to you? What, how did your job change, and how did the organisation's or job, if you
Well,
like, change?
I worked,
Policy change.
it was when I worked in a certain group that I mentioned, the physical infrastructure group. GAO was organized by issue areas. And
Yep.
I worked in the physical infrastructure group for the last 10 years that I was at GAO. And I did several projects on physical infrastructure, buildings, and the laws regarding especially disposal of buildings, which is
Yep.
that not easy. There's a whole process, and leases and lease agreements. And but one particular report that I did, I had the opportunity to work on developing an asset management framework. And that report really changed
Yep.
the work that I did because um, I'll just give you the number. It's GAO 1957. The reports are numbered by fiscal year, so it was fiscal year 2019, and 57 is the number of the report. It came out in November of 2018. But in that report, we looked at real property asset management, and the message of the report was that agencies could benefit from additional information on leading practices. But what we did in that report is we developed an asset management framework. And we did that through reviewing, of course, the ISO 55000 series of standards. And then we looked at literature and we looked at other models. In fact, I believe you were involved in developing the IIMM in Australia. So we looked at that. We looked at many other models, and we did a series of interviews with experts, 22 experts, a lot of research, and we came up with this asset management framework, which was a simplified model. What we try to do, what GAO tries to do, is simplify so that the information is accessible to people who are not experts. So we developed an asset management framework, and then we developed 6 what we called key characteristics, and that really guided my future work because it will be hard to see, but it's basically we had this graphic.
Yeah.
If anyone is interested, it's figure 2.
I've got it here. I've got the report open.
That was really very useful. We did that through synthesizing all of the information and the research that we did. But it includes things like leadership for the organization. And of course, data is very important. Collaboration, how you work within an organization, and how you maximize the value of a portfolio of assets. So I was able to then take that and use it in future work. So that was really a turning point where then in my future reports on physical infrastructure and also personal property, we used it on personal property as well, which is also an asset. As you know, it could be used in any kind of asset, intellectual property, but in the group I worked in, that was mostly focused on physical property. So in future products and future reports, I was able to apply those criteria and use the characteristics as criteria. So it really changed the way of looking, taking a more holistic approach to looking at infrastructure.
Yeah. No, it's good. I'm looking straight at it at the moment. So for the viewer's point of view, I mean, the first step is establishing formal policies and plans, which we know about. Maximising an asset portfolio's value. Step 2, maintaining leadership support. Using quality data. Promoting a collaborative organisational culture. And evaluating and improving asset management practices. Now, and that's common now, because we went through the history of asset management and trying to bring it into the fore in Australia. It was very detailed up front, and as you say, you're keeping it simple. And you looked at some of these things. You look back in 30 years, you look at the complexity of it, And the reason being is people had to understand the concepts of what asset management was about before you could simplify. Because, as you're saying, is what you did. You simplified at the same time, and so you understand all those issues. You got the benefit of that, if you like. Not saying you got it from us, but you got the benefit of that, whereas we didn't have that up front. So that's where the differences come from. And this is a lot nicer, a lot neater. I've been trying very hard in the last year, cleaning up a lot of, the stuff we produce, and going through and getting rid of all the motherhood stuff. I've been doing that for 30 years, and I still still can't struggle at times. But getting rid of that and focusing on what it's really about, and that adds another level again. But once you do that, and people understand, and that's what we are doing. There is organisations that do understand what it's about, and they've adopted it, and they're moving forward and doing a very good job. There are others that are still struggling. So you've got this balance you've got to play with both of them. And, where you're overfeeding one, you're underfeeding the other who doesn't understand. So you've got to, it's not as if we can just go, bam, and here it is. The manual was a
Right.
good start. The manual was a good start. And even better now because it's been handed really to the authorities themselves. So it started as a consulting exercise where it was all the consultants' IP, but over the years it's now the authorities' document. They own it and they produce it, and so it's changed dramatically in that sense as well.
Well,
Because
one thing I really liked when we used, as I say, we reviewed many models, and it is complicated. This is a very simplified version, and the other figure one, is some people call it the hamburger. It has a sort of a dome, and it goes through the different levels of asset management, from the organization, strategic planning, to actually managing the assets, and then reviewing
Yep.
the performance, which is very important. But one thing I really liked about the IIM is that you had case studies. And that was
Yes.
very helpful for us when we were developing this, to understand some of the actual examples.
Yeah. We had to have the case studies because we
Mhm.
really needed to show people what could be done.
Mhm.
And that would win them over. If they could see what could be done,
Right.
and you could answer their questions, and you could apply it, then there was a lot more confidence in what you were saying. I
Right.
mean, when I go back to day one, then there was only me and Roger selling asset management. And back in the late 80s, yeah, you had a hard job because it was the same old, same old. We're doing what we're doing. We just want to continue to do what we're doing. And a lot of the work we got was because of failures, because the authorities were already in trouble. And we needed to change that. That was the initial work. Whereas now it's more a case of they all recognise they have to do it, and while some of them don't understand it, or it's not at a high enough level at the organisation, that the
Right.
people on the ground can't get the support from the top, and that's difficult in itself because they're not structured properly and all the rest of it. For a lot of these organisations, I've got an idea of how to restructure it. I've done it for one of the water authorities, and they asked me to help. And they changed it was about 5 years ago, and they're very happy with what's being produced. Others are still, it's the engineers trying to do everything,
Right.
right? Whereas you got to tell them, no, you don't have to do everything. There's a whole organisation full of experts around you that you can seek help from.
Right. Well, those are two things that we incorporate, as you mentioned. Leadership is very important.
Yeah.
You have to have leadership support,
Yep.
but also collaboration within an organization. Very important.
Absolutely.
Engineers cannot do everything themselves,
No.
and that's why you have finance people, and you have planning. You have all. It has to be across the organization, or I don't believe it's going to succeed if it's not a collaborative effort.
I agree. I agree to the point where I'm trying to get to the people and say that. I said it, I think 30 years ago or thereabouts to the City of Adelaide, and they looked at me. I said, "Look, you'll know when you're doing good asset management when the organisation becomes a primary planning function role." And their eyes just went, "What do you mean?
Right.
We've got all this to do." Well, that's how you're going to see the change.
Right.
right? You're going to have this planning, and it's going to drive what you're doing through the drivers that come in, either internal or external. But it's going to be the initiator of things, not the other way around, and not in their own world, because a lot of them do tend to do it in their own world. The planners will do their thing, and the engineers will be off doing their own thing.
Yeah, all the silos, right?
Yeah, all the silos. Yeah.
Mhm.
So it's been hard work from that point of view. But that was the initial, what I called the rule of thumb. You know, you walk in an organization, how do you know they're doing good asset management? Well,
Right.
look on the wall. If there's nothing there to say, well, here's our performance, this is what we're achieving. Yeah, so people could actually look and read and understand as they walk down the hallway. Then you had a problem. And then when you walked in and they started talking about, and this is always a symptomatic, is you'd start questioning them and they talk about what they're going to do, not what they are doing.
Right.
And that was an initial red flag. You know, no,
That's a clue.
we want to do this. That's what they're really saying. We want to do it, but there's no one up there driving the ship. And so they were, yeah, it is still, it still is hard, but it's getting a lot easier to get people going. And then when they see their next door neighbours doing well and they're not, you know, they even see there's a problem. You know, we have authorities within Melbourne itself not doing so well, and we've got the ones just north of them doing a fantastic job. So and they've got to ask themselves why. And so what's different? And question that.
Yeah, I think that's how it has worked in the federal government, that one agency will see what another agency is doing, and then they learn that way, as opposed to what you asked me earlier about a requirement, or a requirement coming from the federal government, which we don't have really. There are some, as I said, there are some orders, but it's really one agency will learn from another and then pick up those best practices from the other.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I think is still lacking. You can't, if someone asks you the question, what's best practice in asset management, and took one little entity, say planning, who's doing it well? You could say what it is, but then you'd be struggling to find someone who's doing it absolute.
Right.
And so it's very hard to pinpoint. And you always know, too, that if you say so and so, they'll ring them up, and then they say, well, they're not doing anywhere near what we're doing. So what are you on about? So, you know, so it's perception, but comes down to the fundamental leadership, and it comes down to the fundamental, you know, don't talk to me. You know, I'm the preacher that goes around and waves the book and says, this is what you should be doing. Talk to your neighbours. If they're doing something well, find out why and how, and look at those case studies that are in there and look at them and see what other people are doing. And that makes a big difference.
Right.
You can't just, you talk to me, fine, but I've talked to ones that are doing absolutely terrible and ones that are doing brilliant. And I've got those messages, but, you know, as I say, you can talk to me, but it doesn't mean you're going to do it. And I've always said to organisations, if there's one thing I want to do before I retire, is get in there and help you go from go to woe, because I can get you there. You've got to come along for the ride. Right? And you've got to do it. And that's the hard part.
Well, and one thing here in the federal government in the United States, you know, it does take, you have to have a leadership, but you also, it really is the middle level that is implementing, because, you know, every 4 years, if there's a change in administration, if there's an election and a new president, then you have new leadership. So if leadership is constantly changing, or not constantly, but frequently, then you really need the middle level, the career people who are going to implement. So you need both. You need a vision, but you also need the the career people who are going to stay there and make sure that it gets implemented.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Enjoyed this video? Press the like button and subscribe. If you'd like to see more, please click on the Patreon link below and sign up.